Hey guys, welcome to another writing vlog. I'm on vacation right now, so writing is a thing I want to do because I'm on vacation. I have a lot of time. It's also something I don't want to do because I'm on vacation and I have a lot of time. In fun writing news, I had a publication come out. If you are new to this channel, I write and publish a lot of my short fiction and poetry. And today, my short story, Eat Well, came out in Carousel, which is an absolutely gorgeous magazine. It is free to read. You can read the story online. I will link it in the description. It is about a girlfriend who is simultaneously driven apart from and brought closer to her boyfriend because of her really strange cooking. And by strange cooking, I mean she makes grass juleps instead of mint juleps, like lawn juleps, and granola cheese, which I mean doesn't sound that bad. I feel like a cheese person should weigh in on this. Would you melt a block of mozzarella, then put a whole bunch of granola on it, and then put it in the fridge to harden and then eat it? Would it work if you're a cheese connoisseur? I have been writing a contemporary fantasy novel called Seventh Virtue for a really long time. Let's talk about it. 2 days ago, I wrote 1,300 words in this book. You'd think that'd be a really good thing. Like, oh my God, I wrote 1,300 words. That's a lot of words. I don't remember writing them. I have no recollection of what the words are, what I felt when writing them. It ended up feeling like I didn't write anything at all by the end of the day, even though I had written, which was really annoying because like 1,300 words isn't nothing. You know, it's a good chunk of words. If I wrote 1,300 words in NaNoWriMo, I would have been so happy. I had no feelings after writing the words, and that's how I'm kind of feeling with Seventh Virtue. I hate the ending. I talked about this in my last vlog. I just don't like writing the ending. I really enjoyed where this book was. I don't like change. My autism brain is like, no, please take this away from me. At the same time, I'm really excited because I've been getting a lot of ideas for the sequel. So the sequel, which I'll call SG in the meantime before I reveal the title on my YouTube channel, is very loose in my head, but I have been brainstorming it a lot the last couple of days. I think I've written almost 2,000 words worth of scene notes and scene ideas. So something fun about SG is that it's a sequel to basically a new series of books. I haven't written a book 2 that's super connected to the last one since I wrote book 2 of Fostered. You'd think writing sequels is something that comes naturally to me, seeming as though that's the only thing I managed to write. It's exciting because I haven't written a true book 2 since 2015, so I'm really excited about this one. I already started a notes document for it. So in the meantime, I've been coming up with like the plot musculature of the book, which is really exciting. I am a pantser, but the thing about pantsing is a lot of people think it's black or white. I have been writing for nearly 10 years with this process, and in my process, sometimes I do plan. Some people might be like, why do you call yourself a pantser? Treating pantsing and outlining as a binary, it's not something I personally advocate for. I advocate for doing what you want when you want it and what works for you. This is what's been working for me with the contemporary fantasy. It's a bit more plot heavy. In the meantime, I've actually been doing some art. My sister did an absolutely beautiful cast photo, which I'll pop on the screen, of my babies. I loved her rendition of Lonan. It's like the most accurate, I think, version of Lonan that we've gotten between the two of us in our art in the last couple of years. I was like, hey, can I use your sketch and do a painting? So I've been working on like an acrylic painting of Lonan. Him and I have a really complicated relationship. If you've been around for a long time, you know that Lonan used to be my favorite character. He actually was for a really, really long time, years and years. I'd say like 5 or 6 years straight, Lonan was my favorite character. Harrison, who is his boyfriend, if you are new to the channel, kind of took his place quite quickly because I got sick and tired of Lonan in about 2020. I was writing a book called Feeding Habits, literary fiction. It's very much like Lonan's story in tone, but it actually was overall Harrison's story, and I didn't know that. And because of that, the book was giving me so many issues because I was getting the protagonist wrong, essentially. Since then, Lonan and I have had a bit of a rocky relationship. He meant a lot to me when I was a teenager. I felt kindred spirits with Lonan, which is, I don't know, great for me considering he's not, you know, the most emotionally stable person. So it kind of felt sad to me that I ended up forgetting who he was. Feeding Habits, I thought I knew him, and then I wrote with Harrison, and then Feeding Habits took me so long to write that I eventually lost touch of who Lonan was. And that's because in Feeding Habits, we get to see a different side of him. So here's some context on your boy Lonan because he deserves his own segment. We haven't talked about him in a while. Lonan was a character who actually intrigued me to write him. I wasn't going to write a book 2 of Fostered. Yes, Fostered was supposed to be a standalone. If you have no idea what Fostered is and you're new to this channel, I have an entire video talking about how I accidentally wrote a 10+ book series. It's actually more like 11 now. Yes, Fostered was supposed to just be one book. And then one day I was sitting down and got a vision of 2 characters. One was a girl, one was a guy. Guy was Lonan, back when he used to have a buzz cut. My favorite thing about Lonan, unrelated, is that his redemption arc also coincides with his hair getting longer. Lonan was the antagonist of the Fostered series for a really long time. He comes in book 2, comes in hot. And book 2 of Fostered is a really fun book because Harrison, who is one of the protagonists of Fostered and one of the narrators, actually the main narrator of Seventh Virtue, he has switched sides on his friends. There's 3 core characters, Harrison, Foster, and Reeve. The old books were narrated by Reeve. Now, book 2's fun because Harrison has switched sides. He's left Foster and Reeve, and he's actually joined the big bad government, which, Lonan used to be the government, capital G. He does this in order to protect his friends, but also he then has to sort of ally with Lonan, but they're actually enemies, which is really fun. And from books 2 to 3, they're like mortal enemies. What's funny is in book 3, Lonan has his redemption arc, Zuko-esque. It's very much along that line if you're a fan of that kind of thing. But he started off as a really sucky person, which is really funny. Him and Harrison butt heads. They hate each other, which is really funny. Many times they are compared to an old bickering married couple. So, I was onto something back when I was 13. As the books progress, Lonan increasingly starts to struggle with his mental health. That's why we really related at the time. We had very similar feelings on things when I was like 15, 16. And that kind of becomes central to the books, like basically like the driving plot force for a lot of things. And then eventually we switch into the spin-off series. So not the main books anymore, but we switch off into a spin-off series called Mothwork. And Mothwork and Feeding Habits is a sequel, are the story of Harrison and Lonan's romance, quote unquote. Their romance that's falling apart, breaking, jumping into a volcano, like it's really not happening in those books. In Mothwork, Lonan is also a bit of a piece of work. He's really struggling, and Harrison is also struggling to help him. We still see remnants of the old Lonan from like the book 3, where he's impatient, he is not helpful, he is sometimes mean. We see the redemption arc as well, him trying to be a better person, him trying to mediate his past and take responsibility for his wrongdoings, etc., etc. Feeding Habits is interesting because we see Lonan in a very, very different light. And this is one of the reasons why I struggle to write him now, because he seems to have done a bit of a 180. If I think of Lonan, I always thought of him as somebody who's really logical, he's driven, he's a leader. And in Feeding Habits, he's none of those things. He's really vulnerable, he's really quiet, he doesn't speak, he barely has dialogue really, like he's super internal and he doesn't really leave his own head, which is similar to how things were before. But this internality is a bit different for him in Feeding Habits because he doesn't really want to be there, but he is there. Now, Seventh Virtue is fun because in Seventh Virtue, Lonan is like the most powerful being in his family. He is kind of godlike, essentially. He is part virtue, and a virtue is pretty much the god of a family, essentially. It is the head of a household. It's very mystical, very powerful. One way or another, he becomes part of the virtue, which is not normal, and that means he's also very powerful. So it's interesting how we get him back to that leadership position, that high that he used to be, but also he's struggling and quite literally imprisoned by his family, so we get a bit of Feeding Habits Lonan as well. He's trapped, but he doesn't want to be, right? I've been having such a hard time writing him because it's kind of like we're strangers. I'm like, dude, I don't know who you are anymore. And this is a character I've been writing for nearly 10 years who meant a lot to me, who I never thought I would not know how to write. And it's funny because the same thing happened to me with Reeve when I stopped writing her. Because she had narrated the first 6 books of this series, I thought I would never forget how to write her, and then I did. But now I'm writing her back in Seventh Virtue, and it's like I never forgot. So what's funny is Lonan isn't in Seventh Virtue for a really long time. It's not really his book, which is funny because the entire time they're looking for him, but he's not really important. It's really Reeve and Harrison's book. So now that he's here, it's interesting to actually get to know him, because the more I write him, I'm like, this is who you used to be. He kind of has the same leadership qualities. And on the other hand, he's also still really quiet because he's totally fucked over Harrison's life and he feels bad about it. So you get to see kind of the duality of man, shall we say, in Seventh Virtue. I'm excited to explore more of him in SG and where he's at right now, because Feeding Habits showed me something new about him. It showed me his vulnerability, but in a different way. It's not just vulnerability in an explosive way, but vulnerability in a really quiet, insidious way where I'd never seen that before. So I get to now develop his personality even more, and I'm excited about it. I've said all of this in relation to the painting that I'm doing. I think every single time I look at this picture that my sister made of Lonan, I'm excited. And I've never felt excited. I haven't felt excited about his character in a really long time. So the fact that I'm feeling excited now, I don't know, I can't really ask for more. It's one thing I love about writing Seventh Virtue is rediscovering things that I love. There's a scene, and I'll actually see if I can read some of it for you, in one of the earlier books. I think it's book 5, where Reeve, who is actually Lonan's half-sister, they share a mom. Reeve cuts Lonan's hair for him because it's like getting too long. And at one point she asks like, who used to cut your hair, because they didn't know each other when they were young children. And it's kind of like she's comparing and contrasting her life experience, her childhood with his childhood, which is very tumultuous and very traumatic for him. I actually put that scene in Seventh Virtue, but I made Harrison the one to cut his hair, which is fun because I still have the base of the scene, but it's also changed because of the character and also the tension that they bring. Reeve brought obviously a siblingship, and Harrison is doing something completely different by bringing his, this is his ex-romantic partner. This was his person, so he's bringing that experience into it. So let's compare some of the scene. So here's an excerpt of the original scene. I wrote this a number of years ago. I was probably 15 or 16, and this is in Reeve's point of view, which is a different point of view than Seventh Virtue. This is first person present tense. The scissors are on the counter where Foster left them. Lonan settles himself onto the small wooden stool nestled into the corner of the room, the profile of his cheek facing the mirror. He's still wearing the blue dress shirt, and I have half a mind to ask him why, before I figure it's none of my business and stay out of it. We don't speak much as I'm folding a piece of plastic around his neck, and he's hunching over because even though he's sitting down on a fairly short stool, he's still almost towering over me. Fingering through the thick, dark strands of his hair, I hold the bottom section down in place with the comb and hack off an inch with the gold scissors. For a few minutes, only the sound of hair being cut is audible. Even our breaths are light enough to be undetectable regardless of the silence. So instead of sparking up conversation and accidentally saying something stupid like I did before, I keep to the task at hand. I concentrate on shortening the back and only trimming the front, since I've grown too fond of the length. My fingers are nimble but quick as they work on grabbing at his hair. I can't help but notice how tense he is from underneath me, even though I'm keeping the scissors far from his neck, and his face remains scarily neutral. I try to stop thinking about Lonan and just focus on trimming his hair down in a way that's not too jarringly obvious, but I can't help it. And then the thought barrels straight into me without warning. Growing up, Lonan always thought another woman, a woman who died when he was younger, was his true mother. Was she the one to teach him how to print neatly, to speak formally? Was she the one who taught him to be self-reliant? The one who taught him to read and tie his shoes? Was she there for him like my mother was there for me as a child, or was she distant? Did she love him with her everything even if he wasn't hers? And did she raise him to be the way he is today, or did someone else? Was she the one who cut his hair? Was it his mother or father? The shudder that crawls up my spine is so sudden, my hands jerk to an immediate stop. Lonan, I murmur, voice so quiet it's almost edging towards a whisper. He turns around quickly, only to meet my eyes with concern smothering his expression. Yeah, something wrong? But nothing's wrong, except something is, because tears are welling up in my eyes, and to him, it must look like I'm about to burst into tears within seconds. Lonan, who cut your hair for you when you were a kid? That's the original scene, and here's the scene as it appears in Seventh Virtue, which I wrote like a couple of months ago, maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago. Lonan's need comes in the form of a haircut. The Petersons store scissors in the bathroom cabinet. Of course, this is no ordinary pair of scissors, but rather a sleek gold pair inscribed with a monogrammed P. Capitalism. Do you see the difference already, Harrison? Oh my god. Lonan settles himself onto the small wooden stool nestled in the corner of the room, the profile of his cheek facing the mirror. He wears a clean blue dress shirt, which hadn't occurred to Harrison as being strange. This was Lonan's shirt of choice back when things were normal. If he's wearing one now, it's because the Petersons have gone above and beyond to seek out his preference. Once again, capitalism. I didn't even know I'd carried over the shirt detail. That's hilarious. Except Harrison can't complain. As he rummages under the bathroom sink for a plastic bag to drape around Lonan's shoulders as a makeshift cape, a white comb between his teeth, he appreciates that the shirt hides what he knows lies beneath, bone. Lonan does look healthier somehow, although he's still silverish even in the bathroom's tungsten bulbs. They're both silent as Harrison folds the plastic bag around his neck. The only words exchanged a simple, "Could you lean over?" from Harrison, when he realizes Lonan, even when sitting, is simply too tall for him to get enough leverage for a proper haircut. Susanna cut Harrison's hair from when he was a boy up until a few months before she went missing. The final time, she grumbled to him, then 23, that she'd have to start getting him to sit on the floor if she were to properly cut his hair. And then there's nothing else to do but start. Harrison fingers through Lonan's dark strands of hair, then takes the comb from between his teeth, holding down the bottom section in place. Then he lifts the scissors from the counter and hacks off an inch. And then the room isn't silent anymore. The sound of hair being snipped is symphonic. This is good. It distracts Harrison enough to forget that he's so close to Lonan that if he turned around, they could kiss. Oh my god, yes! But keep him focused on the task at hand. Sue's always said it was easier to take off length and put it back, but Harrison knows Lonan wouldn't care if he went shorter than necessary. His hair at this point touches his shoulders, flops over his ears. Harrison shortens the back until it waves slightly above the nape of Lonan's neck, then secures another section, shortening that one to about halfway down his ear, repeating until he gets to the front. He keeps his breath steady, his fingers nimble as they secure around more sections of hair. When Harrison was a boy, Suze used to cut his hair while she watched The Young and the Restless. She'd sit Harrison on a rocky bar stool, secure his neck with an old Walmart bag, and dredge up the kitchen scissors. The lovers' arguing always made them laugh, even if Harrison was too young to understand what was being said. Sometimes Suze would even buy bottles of Sprite from the corner store, especially for moments like this, and Harrison would sip as she snipped. It was a rare moment of calm for them when nothing else mattered except for mother and son, a positive memory Harrison clings to now. A new thought barrels to the forefront of Harrison's mind. Who cut Lonan's hair when he was a child? Growing up, Lonan didn't spend much time with his mother. In the rare moments she visited until he eventually moved to the 7th roost in his teens, was she the one to teach him how to print neatly and to speak formally? Was she the one who taught him to be self-reliant? The one who taught him to read and tie his shoes? Was she there for him like Susanna tried to be when Harrison was a child, or was she distant? Did she love him with her everything even when she didn't want to? Did she raise him to be the way he is today, or did someone else? Was she the one who cut his hair, or was it his father? The thought makes Harrison's throat dry. Lonan doesn't speak of his father often, even though he solely raised him until his early teens. Lonan Harrison murmurs, his voice so quiet it's almost edging toward a whisper. Lonan's ears twitch, and when Harrison says nothing, his gaze unfocused for a moment, he turns around. Is something wrong? But nothing's wrong, or maybe everything is, because Harrison's hands are suddenly shaking to the point where he puts the scissors down onto the counter. It looks nice, Lonan says in an attempt at reassurance, touching at the shorter frontmost strands. The hair, you're doing a good job. Harrison struggles to breathe. It's not that, he says. Susanna is less than a perfect mother, but in moments she was there. Who was there for Lonan? Who cut your hair for you when you were a kid? Harrison asks. It's so fascinating how the same scene can change context, even though a lot of the lines were the same, especially like toward the end about like asking like who taught Lonan how to like tie his shoes or whatever. That whole section is pretty much the same. It's interesting how so much of it can change. The tension of it can change. I think the scene with Reeve, you can feel like this immense sadness because they were siblings, but he didn't get the same childhood as her, and she mourns that for him. And then Harrison sort of mourns that as well, but there's this extra tension. I mean, first of all, this is a really intimate moment for them. This is the first time that they've really interacted quite normally since they reunited in 7th Virtue after about 2 years. So I think Harrison's really focused on kind of like the intensity of this being that moment, and then obviously thinking of his own mother, and they're kind of estranged. She's not there for him anymore. So you're getting kind of like a different tone, but it's also kind of similar because obviously it's the same scene. All right, guys, so this is going to be the end of this vlog. I know it was a bit untraditional, but I had a lot of fun just kind of talking about my characters and my process. Writing is one of those things that's so evolutionary, and I think it's a gift to be able to sit down and actually see exactly where in your process you've changed or where along the timeline you've gotten better. And looking at that scene, I think, was particularly interesting for me. And even editing this video, seeing how much I understand Lonan, even though I was like, I don't understand who this person is. Clearly, from watching this back, I do understand who he is. Speaking of who he is, here he is. I'm varnishing the painting that I talked about. I thought it would be a great full circle moment to close out this video. I painted this in about a day and a half. This is my first time using professional grade acrylic paint, and I absolutely loved it. This is Lonan, if you don't know what he looks like. I think he turned out really magnificently. Being grateful for a person that doesn't exist seems a bit silly, doesn't it? But it's funny how people who are probably watching this video can relate to exactly what I'm saying. Sometimes characters can give you so much, sometimes you don't even realize how much they've given you. It was really a peaceful experience to just immerse myself quite literally in creating Lonan the last couple of days physically in this painting, but also thinking about him a lot, because it's funny how you can lose empathy empathy for a character that used to be the person you felt the most for. I think the last couple of days of reflection has kind of sealed that gap, which is a perfect way to start the new year because this man's going to be very important in the next couple of books, so I really need him to work with me. Hope you guys enjoyed this vlog. Who's a character that is particularly special to you and why? Let's chat about it in the comments, but for now, I'll see you guys in another video. Bye!